Hello and welcome to the third instalment of my 5 podcasts, all looking at medicine through time. Now, so far we've looked at the understanding of the causes of diseases, and we've also looked at treatment from the Romans right through to modern day. And this third podcast is going to look at the training of doctors and nurses. This is our third strand, and we're going to follow the same pattern that we have been doing, charting from Romans to modern day, the change and areas of continuity, and the factors that are causing it. So let's get straight into examining then how did this strand, the training of doctors and nurses, change over time and why. Now, interestingly, during the Roman period, although healthcare is very important, doctors during the Roman period are actually not that highly respected, as many of the treatments that they use don't work. And many doctors actually were Greek. They came from Greece, because Greece fell under the Roman Empire. And as a result of this, many Romans didn't really like being treated by what they considered as foreigners. So there was a generally lower respect level for doctors and physicians during this time period. And this is the reason that many people didn't like Galen at the time and his ideas, although he was quite an arrogant person. This has been documented as well. Now, medicine during this time was linked very heavily to philosophy. The Greeks thought about this, and the Greeks promoted this, that they were one and the other. So as a result, there was a real examination and training of examining a person's lifestyle. The Romans incorporated the knowledge of plants and treatments that they gained from other countries from expanding the empire into these Greek ideas. And these together formed sort of the foundations of medical training during the Roman era. Effective Roman treatment was limited, though, in Britain itself, as it was right on the outskirts of the empire, so the best physicians and doctors generally would have stayed in Rome. But saying that, army legions did and would have brought their doctors with them, and as a result brought medical practitioners with them who could have shared their ideas and trained other physicians and doctors within the UK. No qualifications were actually needed at all, and shadowing doctors, reading the ideas on how to treat, observation, observing and communicating and sharing your ideas, following that philosophical belief was essential to your training. And once that had been established and you had done a certain amount of years of shadowing a doctor, doing your reading, you were seen as being qualified. You would have had to have also taken what was known as the Hippocratic Oath to have become a doctor. Interestingly, though, at this time there wasn't as what we would call a nurse. So we look here at the role of what women had, and really the only role that women had during the Roman era was to actually deliver babies. They needed no qualification to be able to do that. It would just be passed on from mother to daughter, the understanding of being able to do that. Now, during the Dark Ages, along with many medical practices, trained physicians almost totally disappeared within Britain. But as the Christian church grows and develops, Christian monasteries and convents had libraries, and these libraries preserved the books of the old teachings of Galen. And when at the end of this era societies became more stable, universities were established, and the subject of the arts were offered, and within this medical training was undertaken. So we start to see medical training appearing again within universities, but under the remit, under the title of the arts. And this is more than likely why we see astronomy, so the stars, playing such an important part in the understanding of what's causing disease at the end of the Dark Ages and as we move through to the medieval era. Now, from the sort of the 12th century, we start to see the art of medicine actually becoming a subject of its own, not just something bunged into the arts. And texts were used to teach this, largely the works of Galen, although some other Muslim scholars were also translated and used. And by the 13th century, most societies, communities would not allow a doctor or a physician to practice unless they had had 3 years of study at such a university studying the art of medicine. And obviously all of this was controlled by the church, and that's why the ideas of Galen were heavily promoted, because it fit in with their beliefs that God made the human body. Therefore we see a dip, like is familiar from the Romans to the Dark Ages, so a regression in the training of doctors. But as we move into the medieval era, we start to see progression, change again for more positive, although we're going to see a continuity due to the influence of the church. If we take nursing, nursing still is not a profession that is used as a term at this time. So once again, we'll look at the role of women. And the only form really is of a nurse as such would be the local wise woman. There were little to no female physicians whatsoever, and women can't attend university, so hence are drove out of the profession. Women's only real role was that of a midwife, like that of the Roman era. And to do that, they needed to get a licence from the local bishop to show that they were good character, someone of good character, and would not encourage or do illegal abortions. So female roles are very unskilled, very untrained, and are dependent on understanding being passed down from generation to generation. Now, as we move into the Renaissance, we do see a change, and this is quite a positive and progressive change, unlike some other strands from the medieval to the Renaissance. And this is down to this rebirth in ideas, which is all to do with observing and experimenting and taking a more scientific approach. And this is down to the influence of the church beginning to wane for varying factors that we've already discussed in earlier podcasts. Dissections start to be seen as important, and as a result of this you start to see proof that Galen was wrong. So the idea that he talks about the jawbone having certain elements and it being disproved, and as a result these old ideas are challenged. You see individuals such as Vesalius and Harvey mapping out an accurate map of the human body so that anatomy can be effectively studied in hospitals. And you also see the introduction of some medical schools and teaching hospitals, and at the end of the era it's very much a society of a culture in the training of doctors, of nurses, more of doctors, of questioning what has gone before, observing symptoms, observing what they see within dissections and moving forward from there. Although there is still large gaps in their training due to the lack of understanding of what's causing illness, and also the lack of, therefore, how to treat. If we take the role of nursing, for the first time at the end of the era, we do see the role of a nurse come about similar to what we would have today. And this was more of a role for caring for the sick rather than treating. No qualifications were needed for this, and actually the job of a nurse at the end of the Renaissance, start of the 1750s, into the 1800s, was one of a lower skilled, lower person in society, women who hadn't really got anything, a drunkard's job, effectively. Now, as we move into the 1750 to 1900, so the industrial era, we see the growth of the progression that happened in the Renaissance era with the training of doctors. More dissections occur in medical training, so that there is greater understanding of the anatomy of the human body. Teaching hospitals develop to observe doctors' work, so that they can trainee doctors can see how doctors work, practice, do things effectively. Post 1861, there is far more emphasis on studying microbes and disease through microscopes due to the understanding of the causes of disease. Training included how to use and improve technology such as stethoscopes to diagnose illness. So as technology improves, that has to be incorporated into doctors' training so that they can use this technology to diagnose illnesses much more effectively. Now, as a result of all of this, and it becoming more technical in its approach, qualifications are therefore needed, and doctors needed certificates from the Royal College of Physicians or Royal College of Surgeons, or finally the Society of Apothecaries, in order to be able to practice. And after 1815, the Society of Apothecaries and the Royal College of Surgeons also establish exams before they will actually award certificates. And after 1858, anybody who wished to practice medicine had to register at the Royal Medical Council. So all of this shows that the training of doctors is becoming more technical, more robust, and doctors themselves are much more qualified in what they are doing by the mid to late 1800s. Now, if we take the role of nurses, before 1850, the role of nurses is really the same as in the Renaissance. Very much lack of respect, not really followed, and women in general within the medical arena don't have many options, and you see very, very few females within being doctors. And there are two key individuals that change this. If we take physicians first and doctors, the individual who changed that was Elizabeth Garrett Anderson. Now, women were not allowed to be doctors before Elizabeth Garrett Anderson sort of came along, and Elizabeth, who was actually a nurse, defied the system and went to medical lectures until she was actually forced to stop, and then she continued her studies privately. The Society of Apothecaries did not bar women, and Elizabeth actually was able to pass their exams because of her studies in 1865. After a court case, she was certified as a doctor, but the society later changed its rules to prevent women from qualifying. She set up a medical practice in London and gained a medical degree at the University of Paris. She helped set up a new hospital for women and the London School of Medicine for Women. And she set an important precedent fundamentally, and in 1876 women were allowed to go to university and obtain degrees in order to be able to become doctors. But even after Elizabeth Garrett Anderson did this, many women, largely down to the attitudes of society at the time, didn't become doctors. You had to come from a wealthy background to be able to do so, and many women in those backgrounds had their options limited to them by their family. If we take nursing, though, the key individual who helped the training of nurses was Florence Nightingale. Now, when Florence Nightingale sort of came around, nursing, as I've mentioned, wasn't seen as a respectable job for women, and there was very, very little training before 1850 when Florence Nightingale wanted to get into nursing. Now, Florence Nightingale attended the first nurses training school in Kaiserwerth Hospital, Germany. So she actually trained in Germany, but she was British. After this, she was asked to lead a team of nurses at a military hospital in Scutari during the Crimean War between 1854 and 56. Now here, she actually made a significant difference at Scutari and improved the conditions in the hospital dramatically. And by doing that, she saved many soldiers' lives within Scutari Hospital. And she encouraged quite a few nurses to go over, and she actually received the Victoria Cross for the work that she did. The big thing, though, that was useful there was that it actually gained her huge publicity, and she could use that publicity then to create books, write books on nursing, and she established a hospital for training of nursing and midwives after Scutari. And she encouraged hospitals to be clean and nurses to be clean themselves, to be trained, to be respectable. And actually, after Florence Nightingale's influence, and by the turn of the 1900s, we actually see the role of nurses being much increased, far more respected, far more well trained. If we start thinking then about the 20th century and how doctors are trained then, certainly they are highly respected in the 20th century. Doctors are trained at universities and they have hands-on training. Like in the 1800s, they need to pass exams, they need to be registered. And after 1948, under the NHS, the government pay and regulate doctors so that everybody can access doctors, and their training therefore needs to be regulated. You start to see an increase in consultants in the 20th century, though, so doctors who are specialising in specific areas. Now, as doctors become more specialised in certain areas, and doctors need to be trained in more technical areas due to the understanding of the causes of disease and treatment, it actually then knocks into nurses training having to be increased, and you start to see many nurses at the turn of the century take on smaller responsibilities that doctors used to have to do, such as taking bloods, administering medication, doing smaller procedures, because doctors are having to do so much more now. They have become more trained and they have greater understanding. So by the 20th century, doctors and nurses are highly skilled and are much more respected within communities, and it is seen as a profession that you need. Both nursing and doctors are both professions that require qualifications and regular regulation of, in order to make sure that it is done to the highest quality. Thank you for listening, and I hope that has been useful overview of the training of doctors and nurses from Roman to modern day.